Hey there, welcome to another episode of Moandain Designs. I'm your host Moandain. This video is part of my game care and maintenance series, and today we will be talking about protecting your collection. Like many collectors, I've spent a lot of time actually building my collection and caring for it. And so I believe that it's okay for you to try to protect your collection and spend a little bit of extra money to keep it nice. No one wants to really turn around and spend, $200 or $300 on something and then suddenly it falls down or gets wet and it's just completely ruined and it just loses a lot of the value. This is both for collectors and for gamers as well. Just having everything in great shape is just, a great feeling for me. And, I'm sure there's those of you out there that it's actually a great feeling for you as well. So I'm just going to go over some of the few things that I use. I actually use UV sleeves and box protectors that are a little bit UV resistant. I don't want any UV light getting to the ink of these covers or anything like that and fading them over time. It just looks bad when you see one where it's just kind of like whitewashed out and it doesn't look as new as it used to. I also use a UV protective polish on all of my consoles. The classic example is the Super Nintendo turning yellow and becoming brittle because of the bromide actually reacting with the UV light. Now you can fix that by doing a chemical reaction to reverse the process, but you can only go so far before you just can't do anything anymore. So again, I use a UV protective polish. Usually they're in an auto care area. And I picked one that's fairly thin so that it doesn't do any waxy buildup on the console itself. The next thing I want to talk about is cord burn. A lot of people really don't know about this. Basically, cords have to be flexible, otherwise they become brittle and break apart and stuff, and you can actually see that on some of your older cords. Particularly, I've seen it most on some of the old cords for the Rock Band or Guitar Hero drum kits. The little audio cord that plugs the cymbals in becomes super brittle and it starts breaking these nasty pieces off and it just creates a mess everywhere. Well, most companies actually went a little bit higher quality, and to keep the cables flexible, there's this chemical in there that slowly leaks out as a gas. Unfortunately, this gas, while keeping the cable pliable and making it where you can move it around really well, it also can weaken plastic and in some cases damage plastic pretty bad. I have a system, my TurboGrafx 16, where it looks like someone took a cigarette and laid it on the system, and it's got a chemical burn from a cord on my TurboGrafx 16 controller laying across it for an extended period of time. It weakened the plastic and it made it a little concave, and that's just something that you need to keep an eye out for. Now, not every cord does this, but I do err on this side of caution when it comes to my collection. So anything that I try to do, I wrap the cord up in a figure-8 configuration and wrap the cord around itself. I don't try to wrap cords around the controllers themselves. And in some cases where I already know that the cord actually does cause cord burn, like with the TurboGrafx controllers, with the Sega Dreamcast keyboard or anything like that, I go ahead and store the cord in a modified Ziploc bag so that it doesn't really touch anything else. That way, I can preserve things and not have these, weird odd marks where the plastic's been weakened and kind of like caved in some. The next thing a lot of people have touched on is CD rot. CD rot is basically when the reflective surface of a CD is gone. It's either gone because it got scratched off or it just naturally corroded off. It's most companies use a nickel chrome alloy to put across the back so that the laser can bounce off of it and back into the system so that the CD can be read. If that reflective surface is gone, then the information can't be read because it's not bouncing back into the system. The ways that you can try to prevent this is try to store your CDs in a proper manner. Don't turn around and like put them in a storage unit that's going to have no AC, no climate control whatsoever, because was it like anything below 60 degrees, you're going to have issues, and anything above 85 degrees, I believe you'll have issues. So you got to watch out for CD rot. If handled properly, all of your CD games should last around 100 years. Give or take, just depending on the quality of the build of the press of CD. Next thing is just chemical reaction. Oxidation is a major thing, and it's really just with cartridge-based games because they use metallic contacts to transfer data. So most of the time, oxidation is going to happen no matter what kind of contacts you have, because two pieces of metal touching each other that are not the same piece of metal as in one piece, they're going to have a chemical reaction because there's oxygen, there's buildup, and like electrical current going between the two points of contact. So, mainly I use things like denatured alcohol and cotton swabs and stuff like that to clean these. I am very careful with the denatured alcohol just because it's a paint stripper. It can mess up your labels real quick. So, be sparing with it. Be very careful with it. I would suggest getting a product like 1-Up cards, and then I mainly just go with denatured alcohol. It's actually an old server trick for computers back in the 70s and 80s when you would have to do maintenance on a computer and a server like once a month, and that was found as the best way to clean the contacts without damaging them or scratching them up. The next thing is adhesives on labels. Adhesives naturally are either very strong base or very strong acid. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is because I actually have a couple of games where the adhesive is so acidic that it's actually eating through the label and discoloring the label on the back end. I believe there's a Battletech game that I have on my Sega Genesis that the label's almost becoming unreadable. I've heard of some copies of Shadowrun for the Sega Genesis also, the label becoming damaged and not being readable. So I mean that's another thing, and I don't know how the community is going to react to the idea of maybe even like removing this chemical from the label, reapplying an adhesive to the label that is not as acidic to actually preserve it. But I mean, it is going to become an issue, especially for those adhesives that are starting to react with the labels, and eventually I think some of these original labels are just going to be gone because of that. Another chemical reaction is paints that eat plastics. Some of these companies did not really research how to put paint on plastics or how paints were going to chemically react or anything like that. A personal thing that happened to me was that on my copy of Lunar, there's a cloth map, and over time that cloth map started eating at the case. Thankfully, I found out beforehand, and I modified a comic book bag to hold my map, fold it up, and I put it back in with the case and everything. But I mean, the idea that if I hadn't noticed it, I could have lost that game. And I remember buying that game brand new. So, again, I don't know how the community is going to react to this, but over time, those maps are going to be in contact with the discs themselves. So the sealed copies of these games are going to be ruined no matter what, because the cloth map is touching the disc, and the paint on that cloth map is eating it. I would love to hear what other people have to say about this subject. Please do comment. Well, that's it for this episode of Moandain Designs. I'm your host, Moandain, and I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed making it. If you like what you see, you can support me on my channel on Patreon by clicking the link. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe. Have a wonderful day.